we all kind of know the things that we can change, right? But how do you change that? How do you change your spending habit? How do you change your eating habit? How do you change this thing that is so uh, natural to you, but is so not conducive to your overall well being?
Welcome to Just the Who of Us, hosted by Reah. This is a space for honest, thoughtful conversations around mental health, life journeys, holistic wellnesses, and the experiences that shape who we are. Take a breath, settle in, and join Reah and today's guests as we explore the stories that connect us.
So today we have Daniel with us to discuss how we can change our well-being by ridding things like unhealthy habits, unhealthy life focuses, and manipulating our lifestyle to fit our well-being. And so oftentimes we, get hung up on certain habits, certain ways that we care for or don't care for our body that really get in the way of our overall wellness. And today we are talking about increasing our well being and decreasing our guilty pleasures. That's what we want. So, our conversation kind of started with your brilliant invention, scent espresso, which we're going to dive a little bit deeper into that on a later another episode. But, what kind of started this conversation was this device that you came out with to place in your shower. And essentially, it's more complex than that. But essentially, because I don't want to give too much of it away until the next conversation, but essentially gearing toward a gearing toward a way to provide self-care in a space that you already use, hopefully on a regular basis. Um, so tell me a little bit about who you are and your experience that led you to this kind of aha moment to where, oh, you know what? I need to start taking a little bit better care of myself.
Absolutely. I will do my best to be brief for you. I know you and I have had a chat before, and brief is perhaps not my strongest suit.
I
So
get it.
apologies in advance. Yeah. I suppose key things about me. Let's start there, shall
Yeah.
we? So my name's Dan, as we've mentioned. I am fast approaching 40 years old, though I look like I'm double that. I am currently father of one, hopefully in the future father of more. Part-time golfist, full-time workaholic. Just all round, my approach to everything that I do is I will go into it. In the UK, we'd call it two-footed, but it's I don't tend to want to do things by halves. So where you and I were chatting, and I think I'd love to recap that if I may, is
Absolutely.
where we make this transition in our lives. And as mentioned earlier, I am pushing 40 now. I'm not made of rubber and hopes or dreams as I was when I was a younger man. And throughout my life, I've always been incredibly career minded, career focused. It was instilled into me from a very young age, and it's something I'm proud of, and I've never wanted to lose. But I did absolutely sacrifice my own health at various junctures through that, whether that's as we sit and talk right here, right now, I'm sedentary and sat still, or ultimately, whether it's the time and the hours that you put in, that's been kind of very much my modus operandi, or was my modus operandi. And I think it reached a peak, a zenith for me at our previous business, which I did mention to you last time. I'm a visual person, so here we go. I'm straight in.
Me
This is a
too.
company called Meter. So this was kind of a turning point for me because I joined this company before they had a product, and I helped them build the company. And honestly, one of the best experiences of my entire life. Like, absolutely mind-blowingly fantastic. Wouldn't trade it, wouldn't change it. Absolutely amazing. But I threw myself into it, and I know that was very true of myself and a lot of my colleagues, to the point where, we were being acquired by a much larger US company, and when you're in a startup and you're kind of all focusing on this one goal,
Right.
that's the promised land, right? It's what everybody in startup dreams about, this acquisition.
Right.
And myself and my colleagues, we found ourselves working crazy hours of the day and night just to do two things really, to go through the due diligence process and keep this business that we were building and keeping it going and thriving. And when you're going through that process and utopia or nirvana or whatever you might want to call it is just always just over that next little hurdle.
Right. Right. Yeah.
And we kind of, with the crazy hours that we pulled and the time and effort we put into it, we kind of kidded ourselves and said, hey, you know, once this part's done, everything will quieten down, and then we can focus on continuing to grow the business. Of course, what actually happens is that that hill is always moving ever so slightly away. So, you finish one section. For us, it was that due diligence, and then it became this integration beast of how we integrate with a much larger company across multiple time zones and so on. And the reason I mention this is because that was a turning point for me and also my colleagues Wen and Chris because we were exhausted. We were teetering on the brink of burnout. We didn't know how long we could keep going, and that's where the roots for our new product came from this realization that you can't.
My computer died.
I thought I'd upset you.
No. I'm sorry.
No
I
problem.
this MacBook is old and so it has to stay plugged in and I didn't realize that it had come unplugged. So I was like, oh, what? We're good now though.
Magic.
All right. I'm sorry. Do you remember where you were?
No idea, but that's probably a good thing.
Oh my gosh. Um, okay, so well, you were talking about like getting toward the point of burnout with the initial company.
Yeah. So, supposed to try and pick myself in again. We were at that point, right? We were getting close to that burnout. We were flirting with it, intimately acquainted with it, and this is where the genius of our new idea came from. Because for us, we didn't want to create something that made guilt, right? We wanted to build this respite, this sanctuary, this opportunity to have wellness and relaxation as part of our daily routine. So to not make it a chore, not make it something that you feel bad about, but actually just something that you factor into your day-to-day life and can feel better about it progressively.
Right, right. Because, one of the things is sometimes when you start a project, and this is similar in podcasting too, that when you start a project, especially if it's something that's beneficial to the world, you don't want it to become a chore. It's something that I try to practice in podcasting is that I want this to stay fun. I want it to benefit other people, but I also want it to benefit me. And I think that sometimes when we stop taking care of ourselves, we really start not benefiting anyone because, we start making mistakes or we start not being able to show up or, there's many different ways that that can kind of prevent itself and negatively impact your whole point, your whole goal.
Absolutely. And I think it's so easy to get trapped in that downward negative spiral
Right.
where you feel bad because you haven't done enough, or you feel bad because your loving family haven't had the best out of you because you're exhausted, and then that in turn makes you want to do more, and then that's when mistakes come in, or you get even more exhausted, and you've just got less to give, right?
Yeah.
You're running on empty, and I think that's a really important point, Ria.
Yeah. There's been times as a parent and as a wife that I've gone through that very same thing. Um, like around the time that COVID hit, I was working at a restaurant. And so during the day, I'd be at home. Uh, the kids this was before there was, that brief period of remote learning. And so kids will be at school, they'd come home, I get them situated, and I go to work. And then I'd come home and I'd just be so tired that I'm like, okay, ready to go to
Yeah.
bed. But, I'm coming in, especially my youngest at the time was like, wants to see me. And my husband pointed this out at one point. He's like, well, when he gets home, you're kind of like, why is he not in bed? And I remember saying that, why is he not in bed? I
Mm.
just want to go relax. And, looking at it from this child's perspective, or even my husband's, of like, oh, well, you've been gone and we just want to see you, but you're so tired that you're not really, it's hard sometimes to give everything to everywhere. And
Yeah.
granted, even in that situation, like, well, yeah, the kids were at school during the day, but by the time I saw the kids, or, the day was ending and it was like, I'm tired, but once that was pointed out to me, I was like, oh, once it's kind of like, okay, let me do a little bit better at this. How can I change this? And sometimes you can change the job. Sometimes you can't change the job, right?
Yeah.
So we have to kind of change what we can. And that's typically what we're doing at home, what we're doing between work, between work and home. What are we putting into our body? How are we taking care of ourselves? What are we listening to? What are we watching? All these things that, okay, I can't control this one factor, but I can control these other factors. And that correlates into how, what we put back into our family, our work, or whatever the case may be.
I think that's so true. And I think as well, a key, from my perspective, a key part of that is the kind of the expectation that we
Mhm.
create of ourselves and the power of habit too, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, if we set this, if you don't mind, obviously I don't know your circumstances terribly well, but if we set this expectation of ourselves that, I've come home from a long day at work, I'm exhausted, but I'm going to be all singing, all dancing, Mom, we're going to go and do crafting at the kitchen table at 8 p.m. at night. Um, and it's going to be amazing. Like, that expectational pressure for you is absolutely huge. Whereas maybe your little one would have been absolutely delighted with you guys having a cuddle on the sofa and watching an episode of your favorite TV show together, and you know
Right.
managing that, what we're expecting of ourselves to deliver.
Right.
So that, because yeah, the quality is there, right? Perhaps you could force yourself to go and make a paper mache castle at 8 p.m. at night, but it wouldn't be a fun experience for anybody. Whereas if you guys snuggled up on the sofa and had a cuddle and had a chat and had some background TV on, or whatever it may be, you would create a better quality memory for you both. You would condition yourself that, hey, like, this was great. We've achieved something brilliant, and you're setting your own expectations of yourself.
Absolutely. Yeah. Set attainable goals. Even if it's like, okay, well, I didn't get to spend the day with the kids, but I'm putting them to bed at night when I come in. It's
Yeah.
bedtime. I put them, I learned a little bit ago from my son's therapist. The first 3 minutes and the last 3 minutes of your day are the most important. So my son's 10, so I don't necessarily like tuck him in anymore. He has a process. I have a bedtime process. He reads for about an hour before he goes to sleep, and after he brushes his teeth and does all those things. So I'm still interacting with him while he's doing his nighttime routine of brushing his teeth, or whatever that, the rest of that process, up until he's in his room in his bed winding down. But the 3 minutes that we spend together before he's in bed going to sleep are important. The first 3 minutes that we spend together when we first wake up are important, and it kind of sets the tone for our sleep routine or our morning routine, whatever the time of the day it is. Or if it's dinner time, if sit down and eat together, how are we spending those 15, 20 minutes? You know,
Yeah.
or
Absolutely.
however long. It's a little bit different now because I don't have five small kids. When I had, a five from kid to preteen, it was a little bit different. There was a lot more interactiveness. And now I have a kid a teenager and young adults. And so two of them have moved out. They're young adults, they moved out, and one young adult still lives at home, a teenager and a kid. Both my young adult, my teenager work. One's in school, and then I have the
Mm.
10-year-old who's really the one who's home the most. Um, so it can be a very different process, because routines change as kids age, right? And so things may not be as hands-on as they used to be, but we can still, like, my 10-year-old loves to watch Tracker. We watch shows that are like kind of Law and Order, stuff like that.
No,
So yeah, so those are the kinds of shows we like to watch together. Kind of that criminal investigative kind of, and but there's other, like, other stuff too, but he's out of the, like, kiddie show phase. Um, so what can I do with him while everybody else is out working, whatever the case may be, that is, specific to time with him? How can I spend that time? And then, I mean, it doesn't even have to pertain to parenting, but, just like healthy, productive things that we can do to connect with people that also is very productive to our own health.
hmm
Our social interactions, our social connections, that's very important for our emotional health, our mental health. So, it's all connected into our overall wellness, how we are, and taking care of our mind is part of taking care of ourselves. Um, how we connect people,
Absolutely.
part of our self-care as well.
I find it fascinating as well. This is actually something I was discussing with my co-founder, Wen. Um, so she shared with me something that I love, which is her energy accounting. So we're I'm perhaps it's quite funny. So with myself and my two co-founders, we cover the full spectrum. So on the on the kind of chatty, spontaneous, chaotic side, you probably have me. Then you have my colleague Chris in the mid on the other end, who is like he's an accountant by trade. He is incredibly data driven, incredibly specific. And then somewhere in the middle, you have Wen, who is kind of data driven but a bit more chaotic like me. But she shared with me her energy accounting practice, and it's beautiful. It's like it's something I've adopted myself, that you kind of list the things that fill your soul, and they can be anything. It can be breakfast with your daughter, or in my case, breakfast with my daughter. It can be walking the dog, and then you list the things that drain that energy from you as well.
Oh, yeah.
And you try and balance every day so that at the end of every day, you've got a good balance between the things that fill your cup and the things that take away from it. But I think what's so fascinating between the two of us, we kind of compared notes on our energy accounting. The differences between what energized us and what drained us
Yeah.
were fascinating, because for
Yeah.
me it was spending time with my daughter, spending time with my wife, but it's also stuff like this, getting to know you, getting to talk to people, making a human connection with people, and meeting new people. And on
Right.
the flip side, my colleague Wen, that was something that she found like tiring and exhausting and draining. And
That
I
sounds
just
like my
love this
husband.
concept. Yeah, absolutely. And I just love this concept that, we are so
Yeah.
unique as individuals
Yeah.
that what charges us, what drives us, what gives us that power and energy can be so different. And it's just a tiny little thing can stack up over the course of the day to make sure that at the end of that day, your balance is there. You're not leaving feeling too drained.
Yes. Yes. I love that. I love that uh that I can't think of the word. Practice that practice that you talked about with you and your partner. That's, it's one of those things where it's like, oh yeah, that makes sense, but it makes sense when we do it, you
Yes.
know? And then it's a really good tool. Maybe I think that's the word I was looking for. But it sounds like a really good tool to kind of not only acknowledge, but navigate what makes me feel good, what makes me feel not so good, and it's incredible that you point out it's different for different people. My husband and I are very different in that regard of I'm a very social person. He is not. Like when he's out and he's interacting with people, people love him, but he has a very short battery for it. It's where he wants to be in bed the rest of the day. And me, I'm like, I want to stay here and soak this in.
Yeah.
Do you find that are you and your wife different like that? Because I feel like most couples are actually
Yeah.
different in that way.
I think absolutely, yeah. And I think that's part of they do say, don't they, opposites attract. And I wouldn't say we're total opposites from my wife and I, but I think we take joy from some very different things and then some very similar things as well. I think
Right.
we both love nothing more than a lazy cup of tea in bed on a Saturday morning and not getting dressed until noon if it's possible. Um,
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I think there's beauty in that. There's the difference, there's the divergence and the contrast, but you've got those kind of binding pillars that hold you together and support you both.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
So I'm intrigued. You mentioned you and your husband are quite different as well. Like, what's one of your binding pillars that hold you guys together?
Um, we really both, and this is not something that I discovered about myself until later in life, but we both have very similar love language, um, touch, like physical touch, like affection, physical
Mhm.
affection, things like that. We're both very much that's our that's our love language. And like acts of kindness. So we have the same kind of love language. We're different a little bit, and I'm not a very like I love you, love you all the time person.
Mhm.
And he is, but that's also it's not a bad thing. It's just something that I had to kind of adapt to. And now I find myself doing it a lot where I was never like that before. But it kind of goes to your comfort level with a person, right? You can be
Mhm.
affectionate in ways with one person that you never were before because you never felt safe enough to do that before. But yeah, I think that's one thing that really binds us is our preference of affection,
Yeah.
our love
Oh,
languages. I keep forgetting words. I'm telling you about it's the baby cold brain.
yes.
But yeah, our how we show affection is that we are very similar in that now. Um,
Fabulous.
I am a, like I said, I'm a very social person, but I'm always a person who like kind of always has to feel productive. So I'm not a very like just lay in bed kind of person. However, I have become a little bit, I allow myself to do that from time to time because of my husband, because he is a very like, I need to recharge. If
Mhm.
I don't, I mean, I can feel well, but still need to rest, and he's very big on that form of self care, paying attention to his body. And whereas I am like, I need to always be, but I also am diagnosed ADHD. So that's my brain always needing to be running. I'm like, I always need to feel productive. But I also have learned to take care of myself in the sense of sometimes I can just not do anything today. And he, that's something I learned from him. The main thing is, just really driving to people that self-care isn't it's important. It's important to how
Mm.
we treat ourselves, how we in turn treat other people. But I do want to talk a little bit too about letting go of those those indulgences, and how that can play a part on our how we take care of ourselves, the kind of decisions that we make. Another thing that I wanted to bring to talk about is shedding those negative indulgences. And, this is, I mean, it's kind of a complex topic, right? Because typically we overindulge in something because it can be as simple as it can be an emotional crutch or it can be all the way to an addiction, right?
Mhm.
Um, but on the scale of just more simple, overindulgence as an emotional crutch due to lack of self-care. For me, I think I have a habit of emotional eating. And, it's not even something that I really correlated as an issue until the 30s. And that's because, well, mid to late 30s is when I started obtaining my education in psychology and mental health counseling and stuff. So I didn't really formally learn about my brain and my body and the correlation between emotions and traumas and things like that until late 30s. So, it was kind of like this for me was emotional eating. Like, oh, anytime I feel an emotion, I want to eat or drink
Mhm.
something or, not even necessarily alcohol, but a soda or a latte or, whatever the case may be. And I found myself doing it a lot more when I wasn't focusing on taking care of myself. I'm eating more fast food, I'm drinking more coffee or whatever the case may be when I'm busier and not as focused on myself. Have you had an experience like that?
Um, so I think you raise a really interesting topic there because I've been a long-term smoker since the age of about 14. Um, that was incredibly hard to let go of. I am constant fidgeter. You can't see it now, but even I at the moment I have a paperclip. There are just things that I'm not nervous, I'm not stressed, but
Yeah.
it is just a busy, busy time. So I'm sitting here and sorry, my little daughter's just trying to get in. Um, I'll be with you shortly. Sorry about that.
No, you're fine.
So fidgeter, definitely with the eating. I think I've probably put in about 20 kg over the past 10 years. But it's interesting you say like I've never been sort of a terribly big drinker, but for me the emotional crutches, if I am thinking, if I am busy, if I am doing something, I am constantly in action, right? Like my hands are moving constantly. I'm fidgeting with something. And I think that was for me why smoking was such a great thing because it gave me this thing that I could do that I don't give this nervous kind of energy off, right? Because I can sit and I can be cool. I can smoke, which obviously we know it's definitely not cool. We know it's bad for you. We know it's poisonous and toxic.
Yeah.
Um, but I think even now, it's something I'd love to work on because I will sit and do it with my colleagues, like I will sit and shred pieces of paper or something like that, and I'm paying full attention. It's
Mhm.
just my hands are busy. I need this fidget thing to do, and it always was smoking. So I've tried to replace it with something a bit more healthier by I've had various toys. This is why I won't show you, but if you looked at my desk, there's just various things that I fidget and play with, which are in a
Yeah.
lot of ways it's my crutch, right? It helps my brain
Yeah.
function. It helps me get my kind of emotion into something that's not killing me ultimately by inhaling a load of poisons.
Yeah. No, I quit smoking about 10 years ago.
How
And
do you find it?
I I can't stand the smell of cigarettes.
Yeah,
Like
me neither.
like it just repulses me. And like people will be outside, like outside of an establishment smoking cigarettes. And I'm like I really it's so gross. I really don't want it, but I'm not gonna say anything to them because like I used to be there, but I it's so gross now. I'm so grossed out by it. And a funny thing is, I used to work at IHOP a long time ago, but like it was the culture for a long time. When I worked at IHOP, you could smoke in the restaurant, which is so profoundly disgusting.
Yeah.
We're eating food and smoking cigarettes. Like, what was wrong with us? But it was the culture. I just turned 40 in May, so we're about the same age, and It was just, it was the culture for a long time.
Yeah,
They used to
absolutely.
smoke in doctors' offices because, well, that was before we started to learn and know better. I mean, I don't think they did like when I was growing up, but you know, a while ago. But it was just, like how times change, and now, like, oh, we're so much more aware now. It's still one of the leading industries here in America, at least, which is pretty sad, but it still makes so much of a profit that it's still being pushed. But that's a whole nother conversation. But that's how, if you want to know how I feel about it, that's how I feel about
Yeah.
it. Now, 10 years later,
Yeah, I appreciate it. And I think it's the same for me as well. I don't know, it just smells really bad, right? I
Yeah.
never used to realize how
Yeah.
bad it smelled.
Yes, I agree. And like on your clothes, like my mom still smokes, and you can kind of smell it on her, and no shot at her, but I'm just like, I'm glad I don't smell like that anymore,
Yeah,
you know.
absolutely.
But it's one
Absolutely.
of those things you have to become aware, before you notice certain things. And for me, it was also it was a large part my husband, because he was like, well, if we're ever going to live together, I don't want to be around cigarettes. And I had tried for a solid year to quit. I had cut back, I'd done all these things, and I really tried for about a solid year. And then one day I was just like, nope. And I never picked one up again. But it doesn't happen that way for everybody.
No,
And to
definitely
be
not. Yeah.
honest, I replaced it with something. I replaced it with overeating, or, like, I still have that addictive component to my brain. So I replace it with other things, and until you really resolve the trauma that led you to that addiction, you're just going to replace it.
Yeah, absolutely right. Yeah.
But that just goes back to self care. And sometimes a form of self care is healing yourself, whether it be through therapy or coaching or whatever the case may be, because that is kind of what we do, right? If we don't heal from our addictions, we just kind of replace them.
Absolutely. Yeah. Address the underlying cause, not the
Yeah,
symptom.
absolutely. Yeah. Like having to stay busy. I talk with my hands. So you can't always see it, but my hands are like always moving when I'm talking.
Yeah, it's always been. I don't know if it's been the same for you. I've always been the same. I always like gesticulating wildly whenever whenever I'm talking about it.
I don't know how long I've done this. I just, I particularly notice it podcasting because I can see myself. I don't know how long I've done it, but I don't know. I'm an animated person, I guess. So maybe that's part. I'm a very visual person too. I need to like paint you a picture with my hands.
Absolutely, it's all part of the fun.
Right. Um, well, is there anything else that you would like to put out there before we wrap up?
Um, I think from my perspective, I suppose just in brief summary, then what we've mentioned, if that's okay. Like,
Yeah.
and I'd like to pose a question to your audience and to you, and maybe this is not something we can answer together right here, right now, but I think my question is to you and to everybody, how do we make self-care be something that is not a taboo subject that we feel guilty about? How do we change the narrative amongst us as a society, and especially amongst the workers, the doers, the people that go out there and give everything for everybody else? How do we empower those people to feel right and good about carving out time for themselves? Um, yeah, which is a broad and deep question that I don't know if we can answer here, but I think it's something that I know we're definitely thinking about, and I think it's something that should be on the tip of people's tongue over the next decade or so until we get a good fix for it.
Yeah, yeah. I think in brief response, tearing away the stigma of
Mm.
experiencing emotions is, probably the first. And luckily, through healthcare, mental health care, there, and even coaching, podcasting, we are starting to see societally that it is becoming more acceptable to have feelings and express feelings. And I think that is the start of the path to that end goal.
Awesome.
And then having guests come on podcasts, and talk about their experience also.
Absolutely. Well, I think we could also dig into and I don't mean today, but the difference there between the perception from the male and female viewpoint on where that line lies, especially when that comes to seeking help and getting guidance and counselling. I think that's a topic we could dedicate dozens of podcasts to, right? But yeah,
Absolutely.
I think it's interesting to see.
Yeah, I actually just recorded just before this recording. I recorded with man. He's a men's mental health coach, and he actually hosts retreats and things like that. And we were talking about men's mental health and stigmas and things like that. So that's interesting that you say that. Maybe we'll have to make some kind of words, where you do a certain topic. You have,
triple header.
yeah, something like that. Yeah, or a series. That's what I was.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll have to do some kind of series on men's mental health, and have you guys talk about that, because it's absolutely important. As a wife, as a mother to sons, I 100% believe that it is something that should, that stigma should be done away with. That men
I think,
have emotion outside of anger and things like that, or toughness, or whatever.
I think across the board as well, right? Because if you look on the flip side of that coin, it's exactly the same for the female gender as well, but just in a different aspect, right?
Absolutely.
Because if you are in touch with your emotions, then you are spoken down to, or it's you're overreacting, or you're not reacting in the right way. And I feel like there's got to be a middle ground somewhere between, for both of us and for all of us of all genders, where we can all openly talk and reflect on these things and learn to better ourselves without it being pigeonholed or typecast into a gender specific role.
Right. Yep, I agree.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for talking to me today. I really, really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you for being here.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you for spending this time with us on Just the Who of Us. We hope today's conversation offered reflection, comfort, or a moment of clarity. If this episode resonated with you, feel free to share it with someone who may need it. Until next time, take care of yourself, and remember, you're not alone in the journey.